You're listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport Media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
Well, folks, again, we are here at CPAC Live. Our good friend James Robbins has joined us now from the Conservative Connection.
Hey, everybody.
James, a lot of people here, a lot of exhibitors, a lot of people in the media and politicians just roaming the halls, stopping to meet and greet with people, just having, everyday normal conversations. It's funny, I was listening to your show Wednesday, Jim, and you made the point that first of all, you recommended, not that you were endorsing CPAC, but you made the point that I recommend you go because, one, a lot of good things do happen here. Is it perfect? No. But the people that you meet and the conversations you become a part of are as important as anything else.
Absolutely. Just as I arrived here, your producer, the dynamic B. Wilson, showed me a little picture she just took of herself with Alan West. Hey, that's pretty cool. You can come to CPAC, meet Alan West. I just saw some other movers and shakers walking by, sitting here in Radio Row. People in Radio Land have to imagine, but we're sitting in a main thoroughfare of CPAC with just everybody walking back and forth. We're kind of on the main access route to the VIP dinner, so we're seeing all kinds of folks.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm a little jealous because we're sitting here and we're hungry, and all these people are going to go feed themselves.
Well, yeah, because we're working. See, someone has to do the work while these other people hang out and, have the rubber chicken. So
it's not just that. They're serving adult beverages, and we're sitting here debating the ills of this country.
Oh, I thought I was promised that we would have some here. Where's the where's the drink? Don't we have a beer cooler or something?
It's the unnamed backup producer's fault.
The backup, Beatrice, please fire the backup producer immediately. So I'll tell you what, one of the things that I've enjoyed, and I've enjoyed this at every CPAC, is the fact that there's so many great one-to-one debates off the floor, out of the limelight, including some very well-known figures and just young college kids who want to get engaged, who are just really learning about the world around them, how it impacts them. Many of these folks are coming out. They're trying to get jobs. They're realizing, hey, it's kind of hard. The commander-in-chief is giving away the farm, and companies aren't as, they're not as excited about hiring new blood. And you listen to these debates, and what you realize is this thing that the left would have you believe, which is that the right wing is like this monolithic indoctrination machine, is absolutely not true. There's fabulous debate here going on, and in some cases you're listening to the argument and you're thinking, hey, I can actually agree with both sides. They're both making really intelligent points, which goes back to the primary premise that politics is really about, is intelligent, passionate, intellectual discourse so that we can do a good job of getting to the truth. The truth being the thing that's most likely to have a positive impact on improving this country, on leaving a better nation for our kids and for our grandkids. And there's very few people who are attending this event who don't ultimately have that in mind. And even for the people who we virulently disagree with, I think we really need to go back to at least having a little more respect in our conversations and get out of this game that we've been in for a while, and I think it's been exemplified by this administration, which is if they're on the other team, I must come out and basically, just take a nuclear approach to my political, gamesmanship. I find that very, very disturbing.
It really is disturbing, and when you look at the cleavage in our society these days between the two sides and the almost irreconcilable differences, I would say, the vast gulf that's opened up, it's really a shame. People talk about bipartisanship in the White House, but it's really just a game. They're really just trying to score political points because that's what people want to hear. But poll after poll shows that the American people want candidates, they want politicians, they want opinion makers who can reach out and try to find compromise. And, when you mention the young people who are here, that's another great reason for coming to something like this. You meet all of these young folks who are dynamic, they're intelligent, They're generally good looking. They're just fun to talk to. They have ideas. People say, "Oh, like you're brainwashing these kids." No, they're the ones who come here with the energy and the enthusiasm and the ideas, and they're just throwing off sparks right and left.
Well, quite frankly, they're the ones we owe an apology toward, and they're the ones who we need to depend on one day when we're old, when we're the seasoned citizens, and we need to give these people the tools. We need to respect what we hand to them, and we also need to be fair enough and give them the tools so that they can continue to govern this country for another couple hundred years.
They're going to pay our Social Security, so we better include them.
If the system is still here, yes.
Well, I was being optimistic. Joe.
Right.
Yeah, standing before us is our new temporary guest producer who's scratching his head, going, "What Social Security? And is that actually going to exist when I need it one day?"
That brings up an interesting point, because I think the job of the future is going to be about 20 hours a week, and you may get paid.
Well, as we were
but you'll have health care.
Well, as we were discussing on the Conservative Connection Wednesday, there's really no reason for anyone to work, because we learned from Paul Krugman that the government has an unlimited power to print money with no consequences. So the government can just borrow money and print money, and so no problem. So what that gets to, I think it was National Journal, suggested, why even pay taxes? Because, let the government fund itself 100% through debt. But then George, our producer Wednesday on the Conservative Connection, said, well, then why even work? Why not just have the government print money, distribute money, people go out and spend money, and then the government can print it and borrow it all at once? So not only do we not need to pay taxes, we don't ever need to work. All we need to do is let the government pay us off with money that, according to Paul Krugman, will never have no value, and everything will be fine. So I don't even know why we're knocking our brains out trying to balance a budget. We shouldn't even be working.
Jim, I would argue we have anywhere between 50 and 150 million people right now who are on that plan.
Well, you're right. I mean, if you pay people not to work, surprise, they don't work. We have the longest long-term unemployment problem right now that we've had in this country, of more people for the longest period of time not working. And at the same time, we have unemployment benefits being given longer than they ever have historically, and somehow the politicians in Washington are not putting 2 plus 2 together and saying, hey, if we keep extending unemployment benefits, people are going to still be unemployed.
The only thing worse than tens of millions of people not working who've given up even trying to work is the fact that so many of them just don't care. They think it's okay not to work. The death of shame is already old news. It's history. These people have no problem just hanging out, taking advantage of the system. Personally, I think that's disgusting. It's not the country it's just not the country I want to live in.
Well, there's totally no shame in it, and that's a problem, because when you bring up a statistic like 49 million people on food stamps, the most ever in the history of the country, and increasing every month, the administration doesn't seem to show any shame about that. They don't even think it's a problem. In fact, the Secretary of Agriculture said that food stamps are an economic stimulus that actually promote economic growth and create jobs. Now, I don't exactly know how that works, but if that's true, why doesn't everybody use food stamps? I mean, if it stimulates the economy, we should all be using food stamps.
Now, let me get this right. You take $1 in taxes, you spend 30 to 60 cents in administrative costs, the rest goes into a food stamp program, and that's supposed to benefit the economy?
Yeah, according to the Secretary of Agriculture, it creates jobs and growth. And don't forget that about 30 or 40% of that food stamp is funded by borrowed money.
Well, don't forget the queen of fertilizer herself, right? Nancy Pelosi. What was it? We get 1.7, I think, dollars return for every dollar we spend in unemployment. Again,
it's only $1 trillion.
Why work?
I know, it's fantastic. Everybody should go on unemployment. It would be a huge economic boom. The Secretary of Labor has said that unemployment benefits actually stimulate economic activity. You said Nancy Pelosi says it's a 70% return on, for every dollar you get $1.70 back. So heck, I don't know why we don't all just go on unemployment, start taking food stamps. We have Paul Krugman's unlimited money, and I think we've unlocked the secret to happiness in the universe.
Jim, we've got a few minutes before our next guest comes. I wanted to bring up something that I've seen too many articles of recently, and that is the rhetoric coming from North Korea. This really aggressive, hey, we're just going to nuke you. I mean, I don't know how clear they could be about their intentions. I mean, how do you make that kind of a statement publicly like that as a leader, a national figure of a nation, and you're not supposed to be taken seriously?
I don't think someone like Kim Jong-un worries about being taken seriously by anyone outside of his regime. A lot of what they say is just to keep the North Koreans in kind of a fever pitch war mentality, because that's the only thing that they can possibly use to hold that regime together, the notion of an external threat, even though there is no external threat. Well, there's an external threat to their communist system. It's called reality. But other than that, so, yeah, you come to expect this from North Korean leaders. Kim Jong-il did it. Kim Il-sung did it. It's just something that they do. Occasionally, they actually take action. Like, for example, a number of years ago when they released assassins to try to kill the president of South Korea, a mission which failed. But it just goes to show the lengths they'll go to try to create these crises.
When North Korea does have a ballistic missile and a warhead that able to be armed with a nuclear warhead and hit North America, is that a game changer? And that's my concern. At what point do they say, we've been kidding around this, but now we could really do it?
In my opinion, the game already changed. It changed when they tested nuclear weapons, not just for them, but for the other rogue states like Iran, and whoever else wants to build a nuclear weapon, because what they proved was that the poorest, most backward, craziest, most bizarre, twisted regime in the world where people eat grass to stay alive can be a nuclear power. And if that country can be, then any country can be. And that changed the game a lot. Once they develop a weapon that can launch an ICBM, 3-stage, what have you, that could reach our shores, the problem there is going to be they'll want to try to test the thing, and their test could go wrong, and even that could hit us. So it's even a threat, just them having the thing, all the things that could go wrong in that equation. Whether they intended to launch something or not. I mean, how good is North Korean nuclear security? How fine is North Korean missile technology to not just one day spontaneously blow off at us?
It's an obvious concern and a worry. I would add one thing to the comment you made before. While I do believe the vast majority of what folks do in any dictatorship, in any government that's completely run by, if not a dictator, by a small group of folks like an oligarchy, at the end of the day, they are also playing for an external audience, right? Because they have shown that if they play this game, the American administrations, and not even just this one, right? Clinton and Bush bent over backwards. They were weak. They were feckless. They dealt with them like people deal with a spoiled child in a supermarket line by the candy aisle because they're so embarrassed and they don't know how to deal with it. They just want to kind of brush it. They just want to get out of that moment. And we keep doing that until we no longer can out of that moment. When they can hit that 30 to 33 minute multi-stage, we could reach any point in your country. We lost that game. And you can't put that genie back in the bottle.
With that being said, John, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. And we're back, folks, live at CPAC. This is the Final Say Radio Show. This is your host, Brett Rappaport, John Rappaport, and James Robbins, and our amazing producer who's taking great pictures, Beatrice. Well,
who is this James Robbins character you speak of?
Evidently he's written a few books, and he's working on a few others, and he's written, I've picked up a paper from time to time, read a couple editorials, and Jim, I saw, a few of your recent editorials in the USA Today, and I always enjoy those. But you have a book you're working on.
Oh, yeah. I'm currently working on a biography of George Custer, noted Civil War and Indian War general, who was noted for his good luck until it ran out. That book should be coming out around Father's Day 2014. Still working on the draft right now, trying to get out of the politics of Custer, get away from the political correctness and all that kind of stuff, and try to get back to the question of what was it that made the guy famous in the first place? I mean, why was it that people were just so amazed by this warrior, this writer, this politico, all the various things that he did and got involved in? You know, what made him famous to begin with before all the other stuff started getting attached to him?
No, it's interesting. Jim, I have to ask you this question because it's been, different history programs that I've seen. They said the reason that Custer and his troops really couldn't fight off the Indians is because the Indians had superior firing rifles at the time. Is that true from what you've encountered?
Yes, it is true for a variety of reasons. One was that the Native Americans were able to buy commercial off the shelf. I mean, in contemporary terms, they were able to go to the market.
They had a Second Amendment right back then?
Well, hey, of course. Why not? I mean, they were able to buy Winchester rifles from, various people. And meanwhile, the Army had to deal with budget cuts and, questions about how much ammo do you really need and a bunch of other things. And in fact, Custer's men at the Battle of Little Bighorn in some respects were probably worse armed than the Michigan Brigade in the Civil War. So, in terms of the amount of firepower they could put out. So, yeah, one aspect of it was that the Indians outclassed them in their weapons, but, I mean, the real issue there was that Custer was simply outnumbered and in a bad situation.
Yeah. Did they learn a lesson after that, the U.S. Army?
A lesson about arming?
Yes.
Not really. We've seen this in the past where, budget cuts have been more important than getting our troops what they need, or someone has a theory about you don't really need that much ammunition or you don't need a bayonet or something like that.
I find this curious in today's day and age. This administration was Department of Homeland Security purchased, 1.2 billion rounds of hollow point bullets, and yet we want to take away the arms from the people?
Well, yeah.
It's interesting.
More to the point, we have a report that the Marine Corps is having to cut back on ammunition, that they're having to skimp on ammo when they're actually fighting a war, and DHS is putting together a billion-round-plus inventory of ammunition for what purpose? We don't know.
Well, that can make you a little bit queasy, can't you?
Well, yeah, I mean, you just got to wonder. But, I mean, the point is, why can't DHS share a little bit of its, ammo wealth with the Marine Corps who actually need it?
You compare this to something like the Strategic Reserve, right? The Strategic Reserve, in my mind, should never be used for political reasons. It should not be used for financial reasons, unless somehow you can equate that financial reason to something akin to losing a major battle in a war, right? Like not being able to make good on our debt or so forth. If the price of oil goes up, so be it. That's how markets work. Then maybe people will feel pain and they'll realize that we should allow our companies to drill for oil on American lands. But that strategic reserve is there for a reason, and the same should be for ammo. We should never, ever in this country not be properly armed, and I don't care whether it's vehicles. Why we have to go to war and then up-armor vehicles? The fact that we have to use the word up-armor, to me, means about 10,000 people should have been fired. That includes generals, that includes politicians, anybody who in any way, shape, or form was responsible for allowing that to happen, as far as I'm concerned, failed miserably at their jobs.
Well, that's true. But you have lessons learned in war. Really, when you look back at our various wars, whether it's the Civil War, the Spanish War, World War I or II, or even Vietnam or Iraq, you always have a learning curve because you develop weapons for the war that you expect, and then you get into it and you figure out it's not what you thought it was. I mean, our tanks in World War II, for example, when we started out, compared to, say, what the Germans had or what the Russians had, were absolutely inferior. I mean, just, rolling coffins. And it took us a little while to catch up with that. Same thing in the Civil War. We had guys going to war. They had no clue what was coming. And it took a while to adapt to that. So, yes, on the one hand, we'd like to have our troops have the very best things they can have. But we also have to realize that when we get in wars, we run into requirements and things that we hadn't anticipated.
Jim, I agree with that in the historical context. However, I would argue there's a huge difference between back then we didn't fully understand what the enemy had. We didn't have nearly the intelligence. We didn't have satellites. We didn't have the immediate information exchange. We were still using carrier pigeons when some of those tanks we had in World War II were actually manufactured. But when you look at what happened when we went into war in the Middle East, you can't tell me that we shouldn't have learned just watching Israel deal with rolling tanks in, just watching what happened. I mean, we had lessons learned. We saw what happened to Russia. So I think we should have really had the understanding that these people are fighting. They had two major weapons that we don't have. Okay, one is they have far less value for life in the present. They believe they're far more concerned about the afterlife than they are today. And the second thing, well, I guess you could say they're also fanatical and radical, right? But they are perfectly willing to wait us out. They will have patience that we won't have. So for them to just sit around the edge, taking pot shots, killing us little by little here and there, they're guaranteed that we may win every battle, but America will yet again lose the war.
Well, I hope that doesn't happen because we know that happened in Vietnam and seems to be happening right now in Afghanistan. And it's a shame because they can wear down our national will. It's right. They have something that they're fighting for, that they're committed to. They're committed to a multi-generational war against us. And if we don't have that same level of commitment to defend our freedoms from what they're trying to impose, then, yeah, we will lose. I mean, I just hope that people in time will understand exactly what's at stake and understand that it takes that level of commitment.
Well, based on the last election results, I think your hope is going to have to be as patient as our radical Islamist opponents.
Sad but true.
It's interesting. You look at the history of war in this country, and guerrilla tactics have been used forever. I mean, it's always been a part of war. We've studied it in many cases in history, in different continents, in different centuries and millennia. And here you are. We experienced what we did in Vietnam with the tactics that were used against our troops. And then we're surprised in Afghanistan, such as, improvised devices that are blowing up our tanks and vehicles. And you brought up World War II. We ourselves used unusual tactics to try to take out the German tanks. We used anything we could possibly create to try to stop those things.
Oh, sure. Unconventional warfare has been a part of our warfighting since the beginning, since before the Revolution, fighting on the frontier. Of course, our revolutionaries, Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox. I mean, we had a lot of unconventional warriors on our side. Various other frontier wars after that, and aspects of the Civil War, Mosby's Raiders, for example, and the counterinsurgency in Northern Virginia, just across the river from where we are. So, and it's funny, we always forget those lessons. I mean, the lessons of Vietnam had to be relearned. They were the lessons of the Philippine insurrection from 60 years earlier. The lessons we're learning now in Afghanistan, they're the lessons of Vietnam that were forgotten because people just wanted to forget that war. Or we could have picked up from the Soviets.
I was just going to say.
Their war in Afghanistan.
We watched the Soviets go through it.
Yeah, that was my dissertation topic, in fact, was Soviet counterinsurgency in Afghanistan, and they learned from us. The Soviets read our histories of Vietnam and said, okay, we're going to learn the lessons that the Americans learned fighting the Mujahideen, and then they came up with a bunch of great things that we basically ignored instead of looking back on what the Soviets had picked up in their 10-year war.
You know what I've learned in my couple of dozen years of being a grown-up is that you really can't rationalize with people who treat the women like dogs, and they didn't even like dogs. You can't. Seriously, how do you rationalize with people like that? You can't. And to fight these kind of soft wars that we have been trying to do, these quote-unquote civilized wars, is a vicious game that doesn't help us, doesn't help the enemy. It just prolongs the inevitable. And we have to somehow elect leadership that is willing to say war is brutal, war is ugly. We're not going to do it unless we have to, and if we have to, it's going to end quick.
But John, don't you know we can just press a button now, right? I mean, we just press a button, we have a kill list, and all we do is press a button and problem solved, right? That's how we fight war now.
Right. No, we're playing video games with drones
and giving out medals.
Yes. I don't even want to get into the Bronze Star that was given out recently, but that's another day.